But I go, can I just try another one? That moment comes and I just go, this is Sparta!
There are movies that entertain, and then there are movies that leave a mark so deep that even decades later, people are still talking about them. Zack Snyder's 300, released in 2006, is absolutely one of those films. The slow-motion battles, the thunderous war cries, the impossibly sculpted warriors, it all burned itself into the memory of an entire generation. But here is the thing most fans never stop to consider: what they saw on screen was only a fraction of the real story. The true story, the one happening just beyond the edge of the camera, was rawer, darker, and far more extraordinary than anything depicted in the film itself. And for years, much of it stayed hidden. Now, Gerard Butler, the man who roared "This is Sparta" loud enough to shake cinema history, has been gradually pulling back the curtain. What he has revealed changes everything about how you watch that movie. To understand why Butler's revelations hit so hard, you first have to appreciate just how unexpected 300 was as a cultural event. When it arrived in theaters in March 2007, based on Frank Miller's graphic novel of the same name, Hollywood insiders were cautiously optimistic at best. The film had no traditional megastars. It was shot almost entirely inside a Montreal studio surrounded by blue screens. Its visual style was so unusual, so hyper-stylized, that many people genuinely did not know whether mainstream audiences would accept it or reject it entirely. They accepted it with an almost violent enthusiasm. 300 pulled in roughly $70 million in its opening weekend alone, a staggering number that stunned studio executives and film analysts alike. The total worldwide gross climbed past $456 million, all on a production budget of approximately $60 million. That is not just a hit. That is a phenomenon. The film ignited conversations about visual storytelling, about masculinity, about the power of myth. The phrase "This is Sparta" became one of the most quoted and parroted lines in internet history. Gym memberships spiked. Magazine covers changed. The cultural fingerprint of 300 stretched far wider than anyone had predicted. But behind every single frame of that extraordinary success was a human story that the audience never saw, a story of pain, sacrifice, near madness, and a level of physical and psychological commitment that bordered on obsession. Gerard Butler has spoken about the making of 300 in various interviews over the years, and when you piece together everything he has said, a portrait emerges that is almost uncomfortable in its honesty. The set, Butler has admitted openly, was not a glorious place to be. It was brutal. It was exhausting. And it was genuinely dangerous on a near-daily basis. The studio environment in Montreal, while giving Snyder complete visual control, created conditions that were physically punishing for the cast. The artificial lighting required to achieve the film's signature warm, golden, high-contrast look generated enormous amounts of heat. The actors spent long hours in that heat, wearing armor and weapons, performing physically demanding choreography over and over again. Butler himself admitted that there were moments when the combination of heat, dehydration, and sheer exhaustion caught up with him completely. He passed out on set. Not metaphorically, he literally lost consciousness due to overexertion and dehydration during filming. That detail alone tells you something profound about the conditions these actors were enduring. But Butler did not stop there in his honesty. He has recalled, with a vividness that makes it clear the memories are still sharp, that injuries were not occasional on this production. They were constant. Every day somebody was getting taken to the hospital, Butler has said, and he has described specific incidents with the kind of clarity that comes from lived experience: a spear coming within a terrifying margin of an actor's eye during a fight sequence, a cast member fracturing his ankle after a mistimed fall. These were not freak accidents in an otherwise safe environment. They were part of the daily rhythm of making this film. The battle choreography that looks so fluid and controlled on screen was, in reality, a chaotic and hazardous exercise. Real weapons, dulled but still dangerous, were in constant motion. Actors were performing their own fight sequences, not retreating to the sidelines while stunt professionals stepped in. Zack Snyder wanted authenticity, and he got it, but authenticity in this context meant that the people on screen were genuinely at risk. The bruises were real. The muscle tears were real. The exhaustion that settled into the cast's bones after each shooting day was absolutely real. What makes all of this even more remarkable is that the suffering did not begin when the cameras started rolling. It began months earlier, in the training rooms of Jim Jones, where Butler and his fellow cast members underwent a physical transformation that has since become legendary in its own right. Butler trained for approximately 7 months to prepare for the role of King Leonidas. His sessions, led by elite fitness trainer Mark Twight, could run up to 6 hours in a single day. The program combined CrossFit methodology, heavy compound weightlifting, sword fighting drills, and simulated combat scenarios designed to replicate the physical demands of actual warfare. The goal was not simply to make the actors look strong, although the results were visually stunning. The goal was to make them become strong, to develop functional power and endurance that would come through authentically when they moved in front of the camera. Butler has spoken candidly about what this preparation cost him physically. The training led to tendinitis in multiple areas, damage to his hip, and a torn rotator cuff that left him barely able to lift his arms at certain points during the process. He pushed through all of it. He has described the experience as one that nearly destroyed his body, and he has said in interviews that after filming concluded, he was so thoroughly depleted that he could not manage any meaningful training for over a year. His body essentially shut down and demanded rest. For a man of Butler's professional ambition and physical drive, that kind of forced surrender is telling. It reveals just how completely he had depleted himself in service of this role. And yet, looking back, he has never expressed regret. The pain, in his telling, was part of what made the performance possible. Physical preparation was only one dimension of Butler's commitment to Leonidas. What many fans have never fully appreciated is the psychological and even spiritual work he put into the role. Butler has described a meditative practice he developed during the making of the film, a daily ritual in which he attempted to genuinely inhabit the mindset of a man preparing to lead 300 soldiers into a battle he knew could not be won, against an enemy of overwhelming numbers. He has spoken about trying to access what he somewhat humorously described as channeling Leonidas through a weird portal. The language is unusual, but the underlying idea is deeply serious. Butler was not content to simply perform bravery. He wanted to understand it from the inside, to feel what it meant to stand at the edge of annihilation and choose to move forward anyway. That psychological investigation gave his performance a quality that pure physical preparation never could have achieved. This commitment to authenticity extended to his decision to perform as many of his own stunts as possible. Butler believed, and has stated as much in interviews, that there was something that would be lost if he stepped back and let someone else do the dangerous work. The audience might never know the difference consciously, but something would be missing from the energy of the performance. And so he stayed in the chaos, took the hits, absorbed the risk, and delivered a portrayal that felt, and was, genuinely earned. Adding to the challenge was the unusual nature of the production environment itself. Because nearly everything in the film's world was created digitally in post-production, Butler and the rest of the cast were performing against blue screens, reacting to enemies that did not exist, fighting in spaces that would only become real months later in an editing suite. There were no blood packs to trigger visceral reactions. There were no physical sets to ground the actors in a sense of place. Everything had to be conjured from imagination and willpower. That is a demanding acting exercise under any circumstances. Under these conditions, with the physical exhaustion, the heat, the injuries, it required something close to superhuman focus. Butler has talked about one aspect of the production that he clearly holds with particular warmth, and that is the extraordinary bond that formed among the cast during the process. When a group of people suffer together, something happens to their relationship that cannot be manufactured or scripted. It becomes real in a way that most professional relationships never approach. The ensemble, which included Michael Fassbender, Lena Headey, David Wenham, and Dominic West, went through the same grueling training, endured the same brutal days on set, and leaned on each other through the psychological weight of performing in such an unusual and demanding environment. Butler has described this connection as one of the most meaningful things he took away from the entire experience. He has spoken about how the cast developed an unspoken understanding of each other's strengths and limits, how they fed off each other's energy on set, and how that genuine human connection translated directly into the believable brotherhood visible on screen. We felt like we had already been through war, Butler has said, and when you understand everything that preceded those words, it is hard to dismiss them as mere promotional rhetoric. They had been through something genuinely intense together. The loyalty and unity that makes the Spartan warriors in 300 feel real is not an accident of good acting, it is the product of a shared ordeal that left all of them changed. 300 left marks on popular culture that are still visible today. Its visual language, the high contrast color grading, the slow-motion combat sequences, the dramatic lighting that made everything feel like a painting in motion, influenced a generation of filmmakers and television producers. Shows and films like Spartacus, Blood and Sand, Immortals, and even the early seasons of Game of Thrones drew from the aesthetic vocabulary that Snyder established with 300. The film proved that a visually daring, graphic novel-inspired approach to historical epic storytelling could reach mass audiences, and Hollywood took notice in a significant way. The fitness world felt the impact equally. The so-called 300 workout, the grueling regimen developed by Mark Twight and used to prepare the cast, became a genuine cultural phenomenon after details of it leaked into the fitness community. Gyms adopted it, magazines broke it down, and countless ordinary people attempted to replicate what Butler and his castmates had achieved. The physique of the Spartan warrior became a new standard that reshaped conversations about male fitness, discipline, and body image in ways that are still reverberating. Academically, the film sparked renewed curiosity about the actual Battle of Thermopylae and the historical figures involved. Sales of historical texts on the period increased. University courses began using the film as a point of discussion, not as historical fact, but as a window into how myths are constructed and why they endure. Even historians who criticized the film's considerable liberties with the historical record acknowledged its power to ignite curiosity. Before 300, Gerard Butler was a working actor with talent and charm but without the global recognition that transforms a career into a legacy. After 300, he was a star in the fullest sense of the word. The role of Leonidas gave him something that cannot be bought or manufactured, a defining performance, the kind that audiences remember and return to, the kind that establishes an actor's place in the popular imagination permanently. He moved through romantic dramas like P.S. I Love You, action films like Law-Abiding Citizen, and the long-running Fallen franchise with the confidence and range of a man who knows exactly what he is capable of. The diversity of his post-300 career is itself part of the film's legacy, because Leonidas proved not just that Butler could carry an action epic, but that he could carry anything.